good to go. I think we are. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Effectiveness Week. My name is Dan Schrod, Executive Creative Director at the Marketing Practice. I'm joined by Jillian Hart. We'll do introductions in just a second, but wanted to talk to you today about creative effectiveness. Before we dive into that, I want to also give a little plug to all of the things that we have going on this week at the Marketing Practice for Effectiveness Week. We're in day one of a 3-day program, and there's plenty to consume here if you so choose. So if there's anything on this list that looks interesting, just go to themarketingpractice.com. You can sign up for any one of the sessions that are listed here, and loads of great stuff to come. Without further ado, we'll jump in. But I guess before we do that real quick, the marketing practice, I think, stands, in the face of marketing as it's known, and how it is that we see things, is that we want to make marketing mean more in every aspect. That's what we bring to our clients. That's what we bring to their businesses. We believe that meaningful marketing really is foundational to kind of growth, performance of a business. And for us, that starts with appropriate targets, understanding how marketing truly works today and it does in the future, and proving essentially its value at every step of the way. That's what we stand for and what we believe, and that's what you'll experience if you work with us. Okay, our shameless plug is over, and now we'll jump in. Again, my name is Dan Schrod, Executive Creative Director at the Marketing Practice. I've been with the Marketing Practice for a while. I've been in B2B marketing for even longer. And I think the reason that I care the most about creative effectiveness, outside of creative being a core part of my job, is that I've been in B2B for a long time, and I think what I like about it is that you're much closer to audiences, and you're much closer to understanding the nuances of how people think about things and how people interact with products and brands. You get a better sense for the value of the creative work because there's, a closer connection with the customer. And we'll talk a lot more about that as we go forward. But Jillian is my partner in crime today. And Jillian, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Jillian Hart, Associate Strategy Director at the Marketing Practice. My focus here at TMP is really within brand tracking and brand health metrics. I care a lot about creative effectiveness because it demonstrates the impact and importance of the work that I do and my team that we do every single day. So it's really cool to see all the great work that we do put out there, but also the impact that we are generating from the really cool work that we do every day.
Okay, I think our the title of this was data-led creativity. And before we get into that, I wanted to challenge the idea of where data even comes from in relationship to creativity. I think there's creative and putting things out into the world and taking an action as a company and as a brand sets expectations with customers. And that creates data in and of itself. And then customers react to what it is that you're putting out into the world. And that, again, creates more data. So creative fundamentally is about, doing something as an organization, putting your thoughts out into the world, and then listening. And, I think today, the customer has a much stronger and more active participatory voice in a brand and its direction than ever before. You can know much more about what they're thinking, what they're doing along the way. And that for creatives is really powerful because that for us makes it possible to make things more relevant and interesting to them, and to kind of progressively improve things over the course of time based on what we learn. And so that feedback loop is really crucial for us as creatives, but as kind of marketers as a whole as well. And that's what we think about every time that we put a campaign out into the world, or we think about like what a brand needs to be in terms of portraying itself in market. But speaking of the market, it's flooded with creativity. And we'll get into this a little bit more too, but creative, its core purpose is really to stand out, make you feel something, leave an impression. And when it's done right, it. But it's also harder than ever right now. I think the stat here of back in the golden age of advertising, 500 to 1,600 ads per day, and now today 6,000 to 10,000 ads per day. So we're surrounded with things to look at all of the time. Whether or not it's on our phones, whether or not it's at work, whether or not it's out in the world, there's stuff to look at everywhere, and we're inundated by it. But I think it also has meant that the creative quality has gotten progressively better and better and better over time. And it's still possible to break through and kind of reach your audience in really beautiful and interesting ways. And yes, it's competitive, but at the same time, I think customers are looking for things in different ways. They're looking for relevance. They judge what they build based on relevance in different ways than they did, 15, 20 years ago. And that's a great challenge for us when it comes to making things. Yeah, and we're in it every day. We're immersed in this landscape. And yeah, I think more engaging, more personalized experiences are kind of the expectation of customers right now. And that's only going to continue over time. But before we go too far into the future, we also want to take a quick look back. And Jillian's gonna take a look back at marketing and advertising in history.
We're nothing if we don't love history when it comes to marketing. But from Uncle Sam's recruitment, I Want You poster to Spotify's Unwrapped, this is a timeline of some of the most effective ad campaigns in marketing's history. Their cultural impact has actually been very profound and shaped the way that we look at creative effectiveness. So in the following slides, I'll try to take you through very quickly a few examples of what effectiveness looked like for these ads. Some of these campaigns started before we were born, at least before I was born. But the De Beers tagline we remember as it's still being used today. And it's actually one of the most successful slogans in history. And they actually created a tradition that's still strong today. Since they launched their campaign, diamond sales grew actually by 55%, and they created new markets in countries where diamond engagement rings were previously unheard of. Another memorable slogan, "Where's the beef from Wendy's?" was initially started to compete with McDonald's and Burger King, suggesting that Wendy's offered more value with higher quality and meatier burgers. Their immediate sales surged 31% in the year following the campaign. Their total annual revenue increased by over 10% in '84, and the catchphrase was even used in political settings and debates. This campaign also significantly increased their brand recognition. On the next slide, as we start to get into the digital revolution, we started to see the success of brands like Red Bull. The space jump, as we probably have all seen or heard of, quickly became a world record for live streaming in 2012. It garnered over 50 million viewers globally and over 250,000 social media mentions. And this stunt established Red Bull as a leader in extreme sports and innovation. I'm sure we all also heard the Old Spice Smell Like a Man campaign. They did a really effective job at repositioning their brand to be seen as relevant among the younger male demographic. This campaign saw a 1.2 times increase in sales, over 50 million views on the original video, and a significant growth and engagement on their social media channels. We also wanted to provide a perspective from the B2B world, where Salesforce took a position to end software. And through their campaign, they not only positioned themselves as a global tech leader, but they contributed to the broader shift toward cloud computing and influenced the growth of cloud service providers like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. They used stunts and mascots to really disrupt and challenge traditional software licensing models. Another example, the final example here is LinkedIn. They also saw success through their video campaigns featuring real people and real stories. They not only received 80 million video views from their first month, they saw 60% increase in user engagement and a boost in LinkedIn ads revenue for lead generation and B2B marketing.
Great. Well, as you look back at that work, I think a couple of things become clear. You can see work that's delightful, that's unusual, that's hilarious. And quality when you see it. I think, the idea that creative is subjective is somewhat true, but at the same time, I think there are ways to pick apart creative effectiveness in very specific ways. There are 6 things listed here. There are probably even more when it comes to, what the value that creative can bring to the table, from, doing something that's visually novel, to, obviously creating relevance with your audience, or, disrupting, a cultural moment. Those things are all things that creative can do, and does do often. And I think how you measure that, and we'll get into that really specifically going forward, depends on what it is that you're trying to accomplish with the work itself. And yeah, we'll show you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and another history plug here. But marketers, we've really been measuring creative effectiveness since the 1920s, and probably unrecorded long before that. We started conducting in-field research, which at the time was going door to door, asking people to take a look at ads and asking them to provide their reaction, then starting to ask questions like unaided awareness tracking and so on. We then introduced focus groups in the 40s, ethnographies in the 50s, quant research in the 60s. And then with the development of the World Wide Web, market research also evolved to more digital-based methods. And now when we look at how market research is evolving even more today, we're starting to see more AI and machine learning playing a bigger role in our analysis. But all in all, since the dawn of time, marketers really needed to understand and demonstrate the effectiveness of their creative with audience impact at the core of it.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about audience here for a second. I mean, ultimately, whether or not it's art, whether or not it's commerce, the audience is really the source of data, information, feedback, and success. So effectiveness kind of starts and ends with the audience. And really, it's our job as creatives to, put ourselves in the audience shoes, and to really know and understand what it is that they want, what it is that they might want that they might not even be able to express. Those things are kind of fundamental to creating great work, and to doing things that are really going to get attention when it comes to the audience. So, the audience is basically the fundamental aspect of effectiveness. But then when you start to look at, okay, well, if the audience is fundamental, then how do you start to think about, breaking down marketing effectiveness in a couple of different directions? And we can talk about that here. I think primarily at the very top, when you're talking about somebody that you're trying to touch with the work that you're doing as a brand, you're either changing minds or you're changing behaviors. And fundamentally, implanting an idea, or, making, getting somebody to think about something in a particular context is kind of the changing mind side. Behavior is about, kind of the response side, and whether or not you're putting something out there that somebody can respond to immediately. And so that kind of creates this dichotomy between, things that are long term in terms of, changing minds and kind of influencing mindset, and then also changing behavior, which, might be more short term, might be more transactional. But creative plays a role in both in terms of being effective, and that kind of sits in the middle.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting here is, I've never met a person that isn't beholden to, metrics, delivering metrics to stakeholders with varying needs. But creative effectiveness metrics really shouldn't be looked at in a silo. It's really the blend of transaction first and vision first that truly tells the full effectiveness story. So you'll see how we start to look at combining those different types of metrics to tell the bigger story that can impact everyone, whether that's board or anyone on your team, sales teams, etc. And that's why, if you flip to the next slide, Dan, that's why we look at effectiveness across the full funnel, all the way from brand down to demand, from market share and perception and metrics that focus on long-term growth, down to lead generation, to click-through rates that really focus on immediate wins. Kind of going back to your point, Dan, here about changing behaviors. But if brand and demand, like we believe to be impacting each other, their metrics associated should also as well. So this is really just to demonstrate here that it is cyclical. It really truly is, it's a feedback loop, but it's also something that we shouldn't look at these metrics in a silo, rather how they complement each other and tell the bigger story. So how do we look at this from a more tangible perspective? Of course, not every campaign is created equal, and not all effectiveness metrics make sense from program to program. So our approach is really taking a top-down look at campaigns in general, starting from what is the overarching business objective that we are trying to reach, whether that's growth, reputation, sales, etc. What are the specific tactics and objectives that are really going to drive that overarching business objective? And then from there, we start to identify questions that need to be answered that align to the tactical objectives. So an example here, brand awareness. If our objective is brand awareness, the questions that we might want to answer are brand preference, reach or volume of reach, brand emotion. If we want to look at, ICP engagement, the questions that we might want to answer are penetration within a specific account, lead scoring progression, and so on and so forth. So then we are able to provide a map or a construct for us to be able to specifically link KPIs and metrics that we need to answer throughout the campaign that ladder up to specific objectives identified. But hopefully this is a really great way to illustrate how we map out creative effectiveness and connect the dots to tell a bigger measurement story, not just look at these metrics in a silo. Rather, how can we combine them to tell a bigger impact story? And Dan, if you flip to the next slide, all of that results in business impact that everyone can understand, even the board. So just a quick example here. The example here, we want to become more known to C-suite audiences. We would be combining varying metrics like C-suite engagements direct on LinkedIn, and then also increase in unaided awareness captured through, let's say, a brand tracking study. Another example would be we want to see an increase in brand awareness overall. So we would combine metrics like increase in aided awareness through a brand tracking study, an increase in overall impressions, and maybe increase in online metrics contributing to that broader story. So again, we're really just not looking at metrics in a silo, but how can we combine different metrics to tell that bigger story? Whereas maybe the board might want to see specific brand or revenue impact, but also we might have to be delivering specific metrics to other stakeholders on our teams.
Yeah. And it may be about prioritizing, what you need to focus on for a period of time, in order to achieve your goals. And the relationship between brand and demand and up and down the funnel, where, you might have a short-term revenue goal that you're trying to meet, but there may be a weakness in your brand in terms of what you're saying to the market. And you need to kind of balance those things out as well. So, I think that's typically the kind of approach that we take. you can identify opportunities up and down the funnel to make improvements in both brand and demand at the same time, typically. Okay. So, talked a little bit about kind of what's happened in the past in terms of effectiveness and creativity. And, we do live in an exciting time where, technology is changing really, really fast. There are new and amazing tools that are emerging pretty much every day at this point. And we wanted to dive into a few and just talk about some of the things that we're keeping our eye on here at the marketing practice. I think in order to start that conversation, I wanted to really first, I think if you think about effectiveness, you have to kind of break it down, especially in relationship to creative, in terms of what it is that you're looking for your creative to achieve. And I think this scale is really a great way of showing, different ways of approaching effectiveness based on kind of what your company goals might be over a given period of time. Is it that you're looking for a really influential idea? Is it that you're looking for a behavior breakthrough? Can you focus your efforts creatively on achieving a really specific goal here that's going to then lead your brand in a particular direction or your demand programs in a particular direction? And I think we look to kind of identify where on this scale we're trying to kind of play with any given program, and whether or not we're in the midst of a brand building effort or whether or not we're trying to just have an influential idea that makes a shorter term impact. So I think, again, starting with your audience and then working into what it is that you're looking to achieve with the creative, those things all kind of start to come together. And then we'll start to talk about, we already showed you kind of KPIs and metrics of measurement, but the new ways of kind of thinking about measurement, response, and, taking a look at creative quality are really exciting. And Jillian's going to jump into those.
Yeah. Measuring effectiveness is getting sci-fi or futuristic. And specifically, we'll go into something called neuromarketing. I want to preface this actually by saying a couple things. Neuromarketing isn't entirely a new concept, but before, brands would have to go through expensive and timely research projects to be able to measure things like facial recognition, eye tracking, biometrics, etc. Today, these technologies are actually becoming more and more accessible to the average marketer and actually changing the way we test and measure creative impact. I won't go into too much detail, but at its core, neuromarketing is trying to understand human behavior at a deeper level and how customers or people think about or how they think and how they make decisions. I guess before we take you through a few examples of how it's done, I'd love to, I don't know how to actually do it, but if anyone has any experience or had experience, whether in their current role or previous, using neuromarketing, I would love to, if you guys just dropped it into the chat. But yeah, so we'll take you through a few examples of who's done it well, but also keep in mind that some of these examples that we're providing is in the B2B space, but we think that there's a lot of principles that can be applied to creating more effective marketing in B2B. So the first example here, and I actually can't pronounce EEG, so I'm just going to keep it as the acronym, but BMW used the EEG electro something something technology to evaluate people's responses to car designs and features within the product design phase. They actually use these insights for better decision making for features that would evoke positive emotions. We've also seen this being done similarly with like Frito-Lay's with flavors and packaging design. But all in all, emotional response is not limited to design and packaging, as these examples suggest, and they can even influence features like UI and UX for SaaS products, and even the advertising that we're doing as well.
Yeah, I think what's exciting about this, and true of a lot of this work is, um, you know, customers can be an unreliable source of data as well in terms of what they express. And you know, customers may not be able to express the emotions they're feeling in a particular way, and or choose not to. And so, getting into the biometric mechanics of it help to kind of pull out some of that information that a customer may not want to or be able to express on their own.
Yeah. And then from a digital perspective, Google has been actually monitoring eye movements to assess the effectiveness of attention and engagement, driving online ads. Their intent for this specific initiative was to help advertisers create more compelling and effective ad campaigns, utilizing their platform and like Google Ad Network. On the next slide, I love this example for a couple of different reasons. Unilever used facial coding to not only test reactions to their videos when they've traditionally used focus groups and surveys in the past. They also put cameras in aisles of their grocery store, specifically on the shelves of their products, to understand the emotional resonance of their products and advertising. And I actually think what's interesting about this example is how they've measured emotional responses across the entire customer journey. And that's actually something I feel like we can learn from and start to integrate more testing and testing methods into B2B buying journeys. A couple more examples here. I hope it's stirring up some cool ideas in your head. And I'm sure, for this example specifically, we've all heard the Dove campaign for Real Beauty. Dove actually monitored share of emotion compared to share of voice and found that their campaign was driving extremely high emotional intensity, which, was their intent here to build strong connections with their audience. This was done through social monitoring tools, looking at sentiment and language and imagery. And a lot of this is also being done, by brands like Dollar Shave Club and Patagonia, really looking at the emotional intensity of their target audience. And finally, a fun example. Oh, sorry, were you gonna?
Oh, go ahead.
A fun example is Tropicana. They partnered with an AI tool to optimize their visual assets. This example here, you can see where the brand would upload their ad or an ad type, and they would use this AI tool to proactively calculate the performance of specific areas in the ad. And at the end of the day, this helped them improve brand awareness and shopper engagement. So a really neat way of integrating AI proactively when looking at the effectiveness of brand.
Wanted to jump to a couple of emerging tools out there that are exciting and that we're starting to look at. I think, this on the left, the idea of predictive creative performance is really interesting. We're starting to see some tools like Illumination by Meta and Facebook coming into play, where you can actually, test ahead of time what customer response is likely to be, using machine learning and AI. That's a really exciting, kind of feedback mechanism, potentially before, a campaign launches, that would, definitely augment focus group work. That's been kind of the traditional way of evaluating creative before it goes into market. And then brand compliance, especially for kind of large scale brands that are global in nature and have a lot of, assets in market. Brand compliance is hard, especially, given the scale and complexity of all of the things that the brands have in play at any given moment. Creative X is a platform that allows you to take a look at kind of your brand across all of it, and assess whether or not there are things that are kind of outside of compliance, and could give marketers a lot of power in relationship to kind of consistency from one market to the next and around the world. One other example that we have here is for Domino's Pizza and Spearable. And Spearable is an interesting new technology which allows you to kind of do you know multivariate testing really in kind of a live space. And I think creative optimization has been a kind of standard way of working in the digital age for some time. But Spearable makes it a little bit easier to do multivariate testing and to kind of iterate on a campaign live to optimize performance as it goes. And so that's something that we're taking a look at too. So those are a few examples of things that are coming up and coming out into the world. AI has had such a major impact on kind of everything that we do. In creative, for sure, we've been operating with Gen AI tools for the better part of almost 2 years now, and continually learning about what's new, what's changing. But I think there's a lot of power in AI that's affecting both the long term and the short term way that we're measuring whether or not creative is effective. And yeah, there are a few of them here, creative lifespan and fatigue, cultural relevance and trend adaptation. There are AI tools that are kind of emerging in all of these spaces. And we're looking at evaluating those and bringing them into play pretty much on an ongoing basis. Jillian, do you have anything to add?
No, I think it's a really exciting time to be able to, utilize AI for not only short-term optimizations, but also, how can we look at patterns over time?
Yeah. Okay. That's what we have for you today. We appreciate your time and wanted to leave you with a couple of quick parting thoughts. I think one of the things that I've always been excited about in terms of creative, putting things out into the world is creating that feedback loop. Your responsibility as a brand is as much to lead as it is to listen. That I think is a huge power and a really fun world to live in relationship to kind of your audience, your customers, what they're thinking, what they're doing, and how things are changing around them all the time. It's vibrant and it's never boring. And then also brand and demand. I think the unification of that kind of loop is essential. Keeping silos out of the way in relationship to data and information for the creatives that you're working with or for the strategists that you're working with is really essential to kind of improving campaign performance over time, improving kind of brand performance in the long term. You can't really look at those things as individual pieces. You have to look at them together. Then finally, there's new stuff everywhere all the time right now. And there are new ways to measure even the same things that we were measuring, back into the 20s. So our recommendation is just to, keep trying, testing new things that are out there. You may find a tool. We seldom find that there's a magic bullet out there. It's usually a combination of factors, and same way that you can't silo off things. You have to look typically at a number of different data streams in order to really understand the story and understand your customer really well. Jillian, any other thoughts?
No, I think you hit on it. Yeah, I know we have a question here as well. Just about, can you share some examples of neuroscience creative ideas in B2B marketing? A couple examples here. I think we would need to do a little bit more digging to look in the specifics of it, but at a high level, we've seen, like HP and Dell using eye tracking studies to navigate and improve and optimize their website. Some interesting things that we saw, IBM, again, I need to figure out more of how they did it, but they used some neuroscience measurement in their sales presentations to really understand how people were, grasping and resonating with the stories that they were telling. Also, I think Salesforce used some biometrics within their Dreamforce event to see how people are responding to some of their speakers and panels and events and stuff. So yeah, some really cool stuff out there. And, I feel like anything that we do, we really could integrate a lot of measurement into all the tactics and activities that we do.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of principles that are technologies that are forming kind of in the B2C space get borrowed into B2B eventually anyway. And I think that's what we're, keen to look at. I think it really comes down to, you know, we know that emotional, B2B buying is just as emotional as B2C, even more so. But I think, there are a few brands doing it, but not that many at this point. So really tapping into understanding the emotional resonance of your campaigns, I think is an untapped potential in the B2B space as well. Are there any other questions? Sorry, I can't see them because I have so much. So, yeah. No? Okay. Well, thanks so much for your time. We've enjoyed, speaking with you. And if there are any questions that you'd like to send after, we're available by email or other means, chat as well. So feel free to ask us any questions that you might have. And otherwise, have a lovely rest of your day. And be sure to check out more of our Effectiveness Week content coming in the next couple of days. Thank you.